So here we have the opening, as soon as it shares, we'll have the opening of the book of Numbers. In the book of Numbers, the first parsha is about a census, and it talks about the census of the entire Jewish people. Before that, there was a census of each tribe, and it was unique because the census was counting the tribes the way they were set up around the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the temple in the desert. They finally built the temple, and they're ready to move. They're going to move in a few weeks after the opening statement of the book of Numbers. And when they would travel, there were 4 camps. The temple was in the center. There were 4 camps around the temple, all the 4 directions. Each camp consisted of 3 tribes. Then you have the tribe of Levi around the temple. And that's the way the census was. So the census was, okay, so the southern camp lists the 3 tribes, lists the total of each tribe, lists the total of the camp, and then you have the total of the entire Jewish people. So there's a lot of counting. And at the end of the parsha, they count the Levites separately. Okay, so we'll talk about that tomorrow, God willing. So there's a lot of counting. The opening statement of the parsha is very straightforward. God tells Moshe and Aaron, take a census, and he says, together with you, you're going to have help. And he lists 12 people, which we know later will be the 12 leaders of the tribes. And lists their names. And okay, fine. Now that Moses and Aaron get help. I'm very happy for them. They're going to get their help. Wonderful. We're going to read a few verses. We'll read some Rashi. And we don't understand what Rashi's trying to say. So there's a lot of commentary trying to figure out what Rashi's trying to say. We're going to maybe skip a little bit of that commentary, go to the broader question, which we'll introduce in a moment. So to show the verses, right? So here we have the beginning of the book of Numbers. Right? The Lord spoke to Moses in the Sinai desert in the tent of meeting on the first day of the 2nd month in the 2nd year after the exodus from the land of Egypt, saying, take the sum of all the congregation of the children of Israel by families following their father's house, a head count for every male according to the number of names, 20 years old and upward. It's basically all who are fit to go out to the army in Israel, right? It wasn't a census. We don't count people. We only count people for a purpose. So we're counting the people who are going to the army. Okay, fine. Then verse 4, with you there shall be a man from each tribe, one who is head of his father's house. In other words, the leaders of the tribes. These are the names of the men who shall stand with you, for Reuben, Elitzur, son of Shteor, for Shimon, Shelumiel, ben son of Surishadai, etc. We go all the way down. Finally, we have the Rashi that we're going to focus on for a minute. These were the ones summoned by the congregation, the princes of the tribes of their fathers. They are the heads of the thousands of Israel. And verse 17 reads, then Moses and Aaron took these men who were indicated by their names. Okay, so I'm going to open the Rashi. Instead of reading the whole essay, the questions on the essay question on these Rashis inside, we'll just read the Rashis and tell me if you think that something was added here. Eile Krueda, the ones summoned to the congregation. They were summoned for every important matter concerning the congregation. I don't know what the question is. I don't know what Rashi is trying to help us with, but that's what Rashi says. These men, these 12 princes, who were indicated to him here by their names, especially in 17, it doesn't seem like Rashi is adding anything. So without getting into the difficulty of what he's trying to answer and what the commentary is saying, whether it ever says that's not straightforward, we're going to go open the Rebbe's essay, and we're going to go to a question that's much more general. And the more general question, if once we answer the general question, we'll get back to the particulars. The general question that Rebbe is going to ask, and we'll read it inside in a minute, but just to get a feel, but the general question that we're going to ask is, why does the Torah have to say verse 16 and 17? These are the ones summoned by the congregation, the princes of the tribes of their fathers. They are the heads of the thousands of Israel. That information we already know. We always said in the beginning that each one, in verse 4, each one who is the head of his father's house. And we know that they're going to be the ones helping you. And Moshe, so God says, these are the people, these are the leaders. And then it says Moses and Aaron took these men who were indicated by their names. That's another interesting way. Why do you have to say that they took their names? It's obvious. Most times when God tells Moshe and Aaron to do something, the Torah doesn't necessarily say that they did it that way. It's redundant, obviously. Here, verse 16 and 17, seemingly, the fact that we say, these are the people who were called by their names. We know who they are. We just spent 12 verses telling you their names. So now once you have all those verses, now you say, oh, these are the people. Number one, that's verse 16. That is seemingly unnecessary. And then you get to verse 17, which is, again, Moses and Aaron did it. Well, we assume they did it. Why do you have to say that explicitly? So we're going to deal with that question. Once we deal with that question, we're going to try to figure what the answer to that question is going to be. Is going to help us clarify what the purpose. It's going to give us new insight into the position of the leaders. And finally, that's going to turn to the broader question of the census and maybe how does that help us? How do we think about our life? That's going to be at the end. So okay, so we're going to start from section 5. And we're going to go to the questions that I just mentioned, which is who needs verse 16 and 17 to begin with. This will all be understood, meaning the previous questions, after prefacing with several other questions that arise when elucidating the verses. The two verses, these are the ones summoned, and Moshe and Aaron took, are ostensibly entirely superfluous. Verse 16 and 17, as we just mentioned, are extra. We don't need them. Regarding the first verse, it was already stated at the beginning of the narrative, with you should be a man from each tribe, a man who is head of his father's house. What is the purpose of the verse here? Once again, describing their rank and at such length. So who needs verse 16? Furthermore, let's skip this a little bit because for this interest of time. B. Okay, no, let's go back. Furthermore, it is unclear what the second verse teaches us. Obviously, Moshe and Aaron would have followed Hashem's instruction to collaborate with the princes when counting the Jews. After recording a command to Moshe, in most cases, the Torah does not record that Moshe actually fulfilled Hashem's command, because this is self-understood. Even if for whatever reason, the verse wanted to record Moshe and Aaron's actual fulfillment of Hashem's commandments, it would have been sufficient to say Moshe and Aaron did so, or at most, Moshe and Aaron took these men. What necessity is there for the verse to continue who were designated by their names, as if we needed to identify once again who was taken? That's question number one. In other words, the entire two verses are superfluous. B, the sequence of Hashem and Moshe's dialogue is baffling. First it says, with you there shall be a man from each tribe, after which Hashem said, these are the names of the men who shall stand with you from Reuven. And then Hashem proceeded to individually enumerate the names of each tribe's prince. Okay, the question we're gonna offer right now is interesting. The question we're gonna offer right now is, the entire list of names is unnecessary. Right? We have 12 names, the Torah list. These are the names of the men who shall stand with you. List of 12 names. The Rebbe is going to say the entire list is unnecessary. Why is the list unnecessary? Because we already know who the princes are, and that we already know who they were, and they already served as the princes, as the leaders of each tribe. We are so. So the story of the census, which is the opening of the second book, is the first of the second month, the first of Iyar. 1 month earlier, the first of the first month was the day of the inauguration of the temple. When the temple was inaugurated, the leaders of the tribes each offered a sacrifice and an offering for the altar, for the temple, for the altar. There, the Torah at great length tells us what the gift was and who the leaders are. So the question is, why does the Torah now have to reiterate the leaders and say each of their names? That's the big question. So in other words, first we said, why is verse 16 and 17 necessary? Verse 16, 17 is 16 is repetition, and 17, we know that if God told Moshe and Aaron to do it, we know that they did it. Why do you have to say it? Never, most cases, the Torah doesn't say, oh, they did as they were commanded. Or if it could say they did as they commanded, but it doesn't say what they did. Here it says what they did. So verse 16 and 17 are extra. And now we're extending the question, not only is 16 and 17 extra, but from verse 5 all the way to verse 15 is also extra. Why? We already know who the leaders of the tribes are. Now, it happens to be that me and you, the reader, don't know who the leaders of the tribes are, because in the book of Numbers, the story of the first, it's out of order. The story of the first month at the inauguration of the temple is only written next week. It's out of order. Why is it out of order is another question. Well, maybe we'll talk about it a different time, but it's out of order. It's very, very clear. Here, the opening statement, it says, on the first of the second month in the second year that they left Egypt. Next parasha, it's going to say that the inauguration was on the first month, the first day of the second year they left, it's the first year they left Egypt. So in other words, you could say the reader doesn't know these people and therefore it was listed. But the Rebbe is going to say that's not what the verse says. The verse doesn't say that. The narrator is not saying this. Verse 5 is God. God is saying, it's a continuation to what God is saying. With you there shall be. And verse 5 is also the words of God, it's not the words of the narrator. So in other words, when God communicated to Moshe, God listed all 12 names. Why did God list all 12 names? Moshe already knew who the leaders of the tribes were from 1 month earlier. God could have just said, together with you shall be the leaders of the tribes. Why does God list their names again? That's the big question. So far we have, after the questions of what is Rashi saying in verse 16 and 17, which we skipped, we're going to the bigger questions. Bigger question is, who needs verse 16 and 17? And now the question is, who needs verse 5 from verse 5 to verse 12? So we'll read a little bit of this question inside, and then we'll make a run for the answers, at least to begin with the answers. So now we're going to say like this. This conversation is strange. Considering that this directive was given on the first day of the second month in the second year, that is on the first day of the month of Iyar, a full month after the Mishkan was erected on the first of Nisan, when these same princes had offered sacrifices to inaugurate the altar, right? Right, as we mentioned, that they were the ones who brought gifts. The leaders of the tribes brought gifts to inaugurate the altar. So we already know who these people are. Why did Hashem now append to his instructions, these are the names of the men, as if he is only now revealing and informing Moshe of the names of the princes when they were already known to Moshe? We'll skip the bracket because the bracket is going to say it's not the narrator of the Torah, this is actually a part of God's words. Okay, fine. Now we're going to start the answers. Right? So far clear? We just spent 15 minutes trying to figure out who needs the opening. Some people say who needs the whole book of the book of Numbers. At least the beginning is very quote unquote boring. There's a lot of numbers and a lot of details there's not much plot. Of course, there's a tremendous amount of significance in everything, as we will see today and tomorrow. But for the casual reader, the first page of the book is very redundant. First of all, as we said, verse 16 and 17 is redundant. Once God says, these are the people who are going to help you count, why do you have to say it again after you list all the names? Why do you have to say that Moshe did as God told him, and he took the people who were mentioned by name, again, highlighting and reiterating what God told him? And then the bigger question, in some sense, the bigger question is, why does God have to reiterate the names? We already know they were 1 month earlier. These people were already the leaders. They're already in positions of leadership. They already offered gifts for the altar and for the tabernacle. So everything is fine. We know who they are. Why do you have to have this repetition? So that's the questions. Now we're going to come to the answer. So what I'm going to do is first give a technical answer, and then we'll read it inside, and then we'll go to the spirit, to what's the significance. So the technical answer is as follows. Yes, there were leaders of the tribes. And yes, a month earlier, they offered gifts on behalf of their tribes or on behalf of themselves, I don't know. They offered gifts for the inauguration of a temple. Yeah, so we know who they are. They don't have to be called to know who they are. But the big idea that the Torah is alluding to by listing their names, and Rashi is clarifying, how he clarifies it, we'll see in a minute, but that's really the point of what Rashi is trying to get at, is that here, these people are getting a new position. In other words, it's the same leaders, but it's a new position. How so? So the big idea is as follows. It used to be the old model. In other words, the leaders of the tribes, the model was that every leader was a leader of his tribe. But the leader of one tribe has nothing to do with the leader of the other tribes. With the other tribes. What we're saying here is that now God tells Moshe, here is a list of people. And when you list people, it's because it's an appointment. When people are appointed, they're listed. That we see clearly in the Torah earlier. Here is the list of these people. And now they're getting a new job. What's their new job? Their new job is not that each one is going to be the leader of his tribe, that too. But these 12 people collectively are going to help Moshe and Aaron take care of the general needs of the general population. So in other words, if up until now the tribe of Judah, the leader of the tribe of Judah was just concerned for the tribe of Judah, now the leader of the tribe of Judah is also summoned to take care of the entire congregation, in some sense. In other words, what does it have to? And it's specifically evident by the census. One way to read the story is the simple way to read it is that Moshe and Aaron have to count. That's their responsibility. They're sort of the overarching leaders. They have the responsibility to count everybody. When they come to count a specific tribe, the leader of the tribe is going to help them count his tribe. That's why you need the leader of the tribe, because he knows about the tribe. He knows who the people are. Presumably, he has the list of who's in the tribe, who's not in the tribe. But that makes sense. The leader of the tribe is going to help Moshe and Aaron count his tribe. What Rashi is highlighting, based on this interpretation of the verses, is that no, all 12 help Moshe count all 12 tribes. And that's a little bit radical, and it's a new idea, and it happens here for the first time, and that's why they have to be listed here, because now they have a new appointment. You're not just the leader of your tribe, but you're now helping with all the tribes, right? I was thinking about it this morning. You have federal elections, okay? Federal elections affect the entire country. So you have the federal law that governs, but then you have the individual states manage the elections. Okay, fine. So you're going to say the governor of California is going to help the federal government do something in California. Okay, fine. That we understand. But now if you would say that all 50 governors help the federal government do something in all 50 states, that's like, what do you mean? If I'm the governor of my state, I just worry about my state. No. So that's the conventional perspective. This perspective and what they're being called here to do, and based on what we're going to say is that's why they have to be named again. We know who they are, but they have to be named again because now they have a new position. Now you're not just the governor of California, but now you're part of the group that whenever Moshe and Aaron need help, you're going to count even the people who are not in your tribe. You're counting all the Jewish people, and now we understand all the questions will be answered. We can go through them. We can answer all the questions. Question is, what's the significance of that? Okay, so that we have to read. That will be the next point. But we have to keep an eye on the clock, and we have to keep an eye on making sure we're all on the same page. But so far, this is what it's looking like. So that's the big idea. The big idea here is they're being named, even though we know who they are, because now it's a new position. Your position is not the leader of the tribe. No, that was the position a month ago. Now your position is that whenever the congregation needs something, whenever Moses and Aaron need help, Moshe and Aaron need help to deal with something that's general for the entire Jewish people, the leaders of the 12 tribes help Moshe and Aaron do the entire task, not just implement it within their own tribe. That's the big idea. That's what the verses are saying. That's what Rashi is saying. We'll try to read a little bit of this inside, and then we'll save time for the most important thing, perhaps, is what is the significance of that, and why is that so important, and why is that so radical, and how does that help us think about our life and our position in the world and within the Jewish people? So we have a lot of work to do. But so far, so good. I hope this makes sense. Comments, questions, please share. Don't wait to the end, because then I'm going to forget the answer. Okay, here we go. To forestall these two questions, meaning why do I need verse 16 and 17? And why do I need verse 5 to verse 15? Why do I have to list all the tribes? And why do I have to say, why do I have to list all the tribes? And why do I have to say why do I have to list all the tribes? And why do I have to say that Moshe and Aaron did, leaders of the tribes, and why do I have to say that Moshe and Aaron did everything that Moshe told them to do? To forestall these two questions, Rashi comments, the summoned ones of the congregation, that's the quote from the verse, says Rashi, this refers to those who were summoned for every important congregational matter. What is Rashi adding? This was a newly designated role for the princes, a role in which they had not served previously. This is in continuation of Rashi's previous comment. On the verse, with you there shall be a man from each tribe. Rashi explains, when you count them, there should be a prince from each tribe with you. Bad translation. When you count them, there should be a prince from each tribe with you. Oh my God, what a bad translation. Unless I'm totally sleeping, I think this is a bad translation. When you count them, there should be a prince from each tribe with you. Rashi is obviously clarifying that the prince's role in collaborating with Moshe and Aaron in the census of the Jewish people was not by having each prince take part in just his tribe census. Rather, all the princes took part in the counting of each and every tribe. Clarification is needed. What relevance did the prince of one tribe have to the census of another tribe, over whom he was not the prince, right? We said, like the model. If you said model, why would one state governor have anything to do with helping Moshe and do something in another state? It's cross state lines, so it's across tribal lines. So here Moshe and Aaron both were leaders of all Jews. Moshe as the Redeemer and leader, and Aaron as the Kohen Gadol for all Jews, the high priest for all Jews. Therefore, they were charged with counting all the tribes of Israel. However, the role of the princes was limited to only the individual tribe that they have governed, that they each governed. So it would be reasonable for each prince to participate in administering his own census, either to accord honor to the prince or for the prince to confirm the identity of each member of his tribe. Some doubt may have arisen as to a Jew's tribal lineage, which the prince could sort out. But what special link does any one prince share with any of the other tribes of Israel that could justify the requirement for him to take part in administering their census? So that's the question. It was about this that Hashem spoke of the summoned ones of the congregation. Hashem had now appointed them to a new position. Besides each one's role as a prince of his tribe, they were now collectively to be summoned for every important congregational matter. They would each relate to and have a bond with the entire congregation and with all Jews, not just the members of their tribe. And that's why they have to be named. That we're going to say number 8. I think we'll skip that. Communal or tribal. Okay, fine. So what did we say so far? Basically, we read it inside what we said earlier. We know the big question is, why do you have to restate the names of the leaders of the tribes? The answer is, you're restating the names because it's a new position. How is this a new position? Because up till now, each leader of each tribe was the leader of his tribe and only his tribe. Now, what God is saying, that Moshe and Aaron, whenever you need help with all the Jewish people, all the 10 tribes, all the leaders of all the 10 tribes will help you count. So in other words, each leader of each tribe helped Moshe count all of the tribes. So it wasn't that Moshe and Aaron had assistance from one leader of each tribe, from one leader for each tribe they counted. But each tribe they counted, they had assistance from all leaders of all 12 tribes. So if that makes sense, we could continue. Okay, the good news is that it's a beautiful idea, and it doesn't even take so long to read. Won't take us so much time. I'm just going to give the crux of the issue by heart, and then we'll read it. We'll read it inside. So generally speaking, when you talk about a census, so the commentators have a lot to say about the census, and certainly the mystics have a lot to say about a census. And even on a very simple level, when you count people, what you're doing, in other words, sometimes we think about the people counting as a number, not counting people as something negative, because you're not counting the individual person. You're just putting me in number as in a bigger group. But from the perspective of Judaism and the perspective of the commentaries, it's different. What you say, when you say you're counting people, what you're saying is you're highlighting not their individual qualities. Because if you're highlighting individual qualities, then not everybody is the same. You're highlighting the similarities between people. Not necessarily the lowest common denominator, it could be the highest common denominator. It could be we're all created in the image of God. It could be we all have infinite value, whatever it may be. But the point here is that a census is not here to show you is not here to highlight the individual qualities and properties of the person or thing being counted. To the contrary, the census is here to highlight the similarity between all the things that you're counting, right? So if I have 10 apples, I'm not highlighting the difference between each apple. I'm saying that what they all have in common is they're all apples. And the same thing is with people. If I'm counting the people, what I'm saying is I'm not looking for your individual quality. That's not less interesting to me. What I'm looking for is to see you as everybody else, as equal in the sense that you all are in common, have something in common that forms the community. Okay, now we understand what the census is. That makes sense. That makes sense. That's no problem. What is a little bit harder to understand is why, according to this new interpretation that we're offering here, that the leaders of the 12 tribes helped Moshe and Aaron count each of the 12 tribes. In other words, there were leaders of 12 tribes helping Moshe count everybody. So now, when you talk about the 12 tribes, now it's already different. You're highlighting differences. You're highlighting individual qualities. Different tribes had different qualities. So if you want to get the communal number, if you want to do a census, count and focus on the similarity between people, why would you then hire to help people who highlight not the common denominator between people, but the differences between the Jewish people, which is the tribes? And you're going to say that everybody, all the various different leaders of the tribes are going to help Moshe and Aaron count the census. Now, Moshe and Aaron represent the leader of all the Jewish people, so they can represent the things that all Jews have in common. But for example, the tribe of Reuven is different than the tribe of Shimon. So why are you hiring the people who highlight the differences between people? Why are you bringing them in to help in the general census? It sounds like these people, their position actually undermines the census. So the idea is going to be like this, and this is a very beautiful idea. The idea is that we want to highlight both qualities. We want to highlight, when we talk about a person, we think about ourselves. We're part of a community. We have things in common with other people. Wonderful. That's highlighted by the census. Then we have our individual self. We have our individual quality. Our tribe has its individual quality, but by extension, every person has an individual quality. And in that sense, I'm different than you and you're different than me, and that's the way it should be. And we have to highlight that and celebrate that. And that's why we bring the leaders of the tribes to highlight that, yes, we're counting you and we're highlighting you part of a community, but we don't want you to forget that your distinction and your uniqueness is also important. Okay, how do you do that both together? So now comes, so that's 2 points. In other words, we're going to say 3 points. We're creating a building of 3 stories. The first story is census highlights, we're a community, we're all the same, we're all interconnected, highlights the things we have in common. Beautiful. So that's step number 1. Step number 2, we highlight that the tribes, when you focus on the tribes, you highlight and focus on the importance of the distinctiveness and uniqueness of each individual. That's step number 2. How do you put 1 and 2 together? So here you have 3. Here you have the leaders of the tribes helping in the general census, meaning the individual qualities help in the general census. I thought that's the opposite. I thought the general census highlights that we're the same, and the individual qualities highlights that we're different. So isn't that a contradiction? So here's the interesting idea. The idea is, when I look at my uniqueness, how do I view that? I could look at my uniqueness and say, I'm different than you, and therefore I'm disconnected from you. Or we could say, I'm different from you, and you're different from me, and therefore we complement each other. Therefore, we're part of one organism, like in the body, right? The body has all different limbs and different parts, and the head needs the toe, but the toe needs the head too. So in other words, you could look at myself and say, I have a specific organ, I have a specific gift, and that makes me an individual, and that makes me important, not just as the same as other people, but I have my own unique contribution. Correct, you have your own unique contribution. But what that does is that unique contribution is why you're needed and you're necessary as part of the collective. In other words, ultimately, seeing myself as an individual is not a contradiction to the collective, but it's one that enhances the collective. In other words, the details will enhance the collective. You're different than me, I'm different than you, and therefore we want to combine to interconnect. So that's really what we're trying to do here by saying that on one hand, we have a census, and the census highlights the fact that we're all one. It highlights the commonalities between ourselves. On the other hand, you have the leaders of the tribe, which highlight the differences, which we do have differences, and we should celebrate them and not forget about them, even in the midst of a census. And then we have something even more interesting. Whereas the leaders of the tribes help not only their tribe, but they help Moses and Aaron count all the Jewish people, meaning to say that the differences create a wholesome community. Why? Because when I see my difference, it's not like I'm unique and therefore I'm myself. It's I'm unique and therefore I'm going to contribute my unique quality and I will receive from your unique quality, and together we become one whole functioning organism. So that is the idea of what we tried to do here. We'll read it inside. But you see, we started with the questions on the verse, that we don't understand why these people are being named and what the repetitiveness and what Rashi says, that these are the people who are being appointed now and they're being called for every matter. What's happening here? We introduce the answer when we say what's happening here is that the tribe, that the reason why these people are being named is because we already know that they were leaders for their respective tribes. Here they're being named because they're being elected to a new position, which is to help Moshe take care of all the tribes. So all 12 leaders help Moshe count all the Jewish people, which is a completely different model. And then we think about what is the symbolism, and the symbolism is that we have this merging, I don't want to say merging, coming together of the collective qualities that everybody shares, which unites them. That's census. And then you have the individual qualities, which in some sense divides, because I'm different than you, and I'm unique and you're unique and we're different. On the other hand, the leaders of the tribes, which highlight the differences, are part of the collective census, because ultimately the uniqueness actually contributes to the community, because what makes me different is what makes my contribution unique, is what makes me to be able to properly connect with other people and receive from them and give them, etc. So that's a little bit of from my memory. Now we'll read it inside. You'll hear it from the source. And then, of course, if you want to share comments, questions, I would be delighted to hear. Two types of count. The explanation. We skipped the questions. We want to leave the questions alone for right now. We'll go straight to the answer. The concept of counting in Rashi's words is to demonstrate their preciousness. That's Rashi very early on in this parsha. Why does God count the people? That demonstrates the preciousness. When you count something, when something is precious to you, you count it. Okay? A way to convey the affection of Hashem for the Jews. The Shalah explains, a Kabbalistic work, that when counted, the Jews become a significant entity, innumerable, and therefore they can never be assimilated. That's a halachic issue. The halachic issue is that sometimes when small substance falls into a large substance, it becomes nullified. But if it's counted, it doesn't become nullified. That's a halachic concept. So symbolically, if we're counted, means we're significant. We're not going to be assimilated within the people. Will maintain our own uniqueness. Okay, this can take two forms. In other words, the preciousness of the Jewish people could take two forms. The purpose of the previous census, in which all Jews were tallied into one total without breaking down into tribes, was to reveal the virtue and preciousness of Jews that is beyond division. This virtue derives from the essential soul of every Jew, where there are no differences between one Jew and another. In other words, if you want, there were earlier censuses in the Torah when they left Egypt. There, we have the number of all the Jewish people. We don't have the number per tribe. What does that highlight? That highlights the soul, the preciousness that every Jew has a soul. And when you come to the soul level, at least the core of the soul, we're all the same. The purpose of the census in our parsha was also to demonstrate the individual virtues. In other words, yes, we have the total, but we also have the subtotal, and we have the total, but we also have the totals of each tribe. So it's doing both. Here we're also demonstrating the individual virtues of Jews, Since there are many differences between Jews, the specific virtues of any single Jew differ from those of another Jew. Each tribe was therefore counted separately. For just as each tribe had its own distinct lifestyles, Torah learning methodology, livelihood, etc., as seen in the blessing given by Yaakov to his sons, and as interpreted by Rashi in his commentary on that passage, they are also understandably distinct in their service of Hashem. It can be said that there were 12 general archetypical paths to serving Hashem, along the lines of which all Jews can be subdivided. Reuven represents service to the way of Reu, seeing, clarity. Shimon represents the service of Shemiah, hearing, etc. In other words, we're saying that there's 12 different tribes, 12 different lifestyles, 12 different ways of serving Hashem, and 12 is just 12 general ones. But within that, there are many different details. But again, once you start counting the tribes, you're highlighting not, you're praising, you're saying, I'm counting these people, not because I'm not looking for the common denominator with all the Jewish people, but I want something specific about this tribe. Okay, so that's a different model. That's looking at people and looking for their unique gift. Nonetheless, in this census, every Jew was counted as one, not more, not less. In other words, even when we're looking at the individual qualities, we don't say that, you're more valuable because you have a greater quality, so we're going to count you as two. In other words, this touches upon the tension between the concept of a census, which by definition, every person is one, which does not highlight the qualities, and then counting tribes, which does highlight qualities. So we have this tension here. Nevertheless, in this census, every Jew was counted as one, not more, not less. This illustrated, as discussed many times, how in this census, there was an aspect concerning which all Jews were equal, despite being divided and counted by families according to their father's house. It follows that within this census can be found paradoxical elements. Despite the census being associated with the individual ranks of Jews, because here we're actually going to count the tribes, within which distinctions exist, those possessing a higher rank, such as the leaders of your tribes, are more important than the lower ranks, your wood choppers and water carriers and so forth. Consequently, this would seemingly discount the possibility of counting everyone equally, attributing each with the same importance. In other words, if you're bringing in the tribes and you're looking at each person for their individual quality, then seemingly that would undermine the concept of taking a census of counting every person as one. Nevertheless, each Jew was also considered equal to all other Jews. How does this work? And that's the idea here. We can posit the following explanation of the conjunction of these two ideas. When the Jews are counted in consideration of their individual virtues, this is to elicit not only the virtue of each Jew or tribe as an individual, but also all the individual virtues together combine to constitute a single complete body. From this perspective, that every individual virtue supplements the whole, there is no distinction of separate ranks. Just as for the whole body to be considered whole, it needs the special functions of the head and brain, so to the body it needs the special functions of the feet. Every Jew is therefore counted equally as a single individual, because in making up the whole, all parts are equal. This also explains why all the princes of the so let's before we do the last paragraph. What are we saying here? We're saying, what's more important, the head or the foot? Well, in some ways, the head is more important, and that's what happens when you look from the lens of the tribe. You're looking at the individual quality of the individual organ. Okay, so then there are going to be differences between people. On the other hand, you could say, in some sense, the head and the foot is the same, because to make somebody a whole body, you need both. And if you're missing a hand or you're missing a foot, you're not a whole body. So when constituting the whole body to make wholesomeness, we need everybody, and everybody is the same. So what we're doing here is like this. Because you're different than me, because you're a head and I'm a foot, and the other person's a hand, because we're different, that's why we constitute a whole entity. Otherwise, it would just be redundancy. So in other words, that's how we're putting these two qualities together. We're saying your individual quality is what makes you critical to the whole, to the complete body. And because you're critical to the complete body, then in that sense, you are just as important as the head or any other part of the organ, because without you, the body would not be complete. This also explains why all the princes of the tribes needed to participate in administering the census of all Jews, being the one summoned for the congregation, the one summoned for every important congregational matter. When taking the census of each tribe, one needed to sense that it was not only a separate census of separate bodies, Rather, the individual tribal enumeration was taken also as part of the general national enumeration. In other words, if only the leader of my tribe counted me, let's say I'm the tribe of Reuven, and only the leader of the tribe of Reuven is counting me. So what I think is, okay, so this guy is highlighting our unique aspect of our tribe, okay? So I'm focusing on our unique aspect. But because who is counting me? Not just Moshe and Aaron, connected to all the Jewish people. Not just the leader of my tribe, which is connected to my individual quality. But now we're being counted by all the leaders of all 12 tribes, which means that when you look at my individual quality, even when you look at my individual quality, I'm part of the other 12 tribes, each of which possess their own individual quality. And together, because of the uniqueness, that's how we become one wholesome body. So that's how all the pieces of the puzzle fill in. That's why we see what's happening here, different than the other censuses. That's why it trickles down even to the position that the leaders of the tribes took. It wasn't that each leader of each tribe helped Moshe count his individual tribe. That would be the conventional understanding. But because here we see clearly, and Rashi is indicating, and the verses are indicating, that these people are being called again, and they're being named again. They're getting a new position. Your position is that now you're individuals. You're a leader. You were an individual leader of an individual tribe, but now you're going to help Moshe with the business of the entire people. So all 12 tribes help, the leaders of all 12 tribes help with the census of all 12 tribes. And what that does for us is that it highlights that the distinctiveness and the uniqueness of every tribe, and by extension, every person, is not a contradiction to the unity, because ultimately, by being unique, that's how we have a wholesome body. Because if you had only a head and only a foot, you'd be in trouble. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is a story in short. Comments or questions, welcome. Otherwise, have a wonderful, wonderful day. And we should see each other in good health. And don't forget about the essence of the soul, in which we are all the same. And then the qualities of the individual gifts and blessings and talents that God gives us, in which we are different. But the differences don't have to separate us. The differences will actually enhance us, because you have something that I don't have, and I have something that you don't. I don't have something that you don't have, and collectively we become the one Jewish people. So thank you very much. Wonderful day. See each other in good health.
Thank you, Rabbi.